webinar. My name is Martin Lanik. I am an industrial organizational psychologist by training, and I serve as the CEO of Pinsight, a provider of virtual leadership assessment and development solutions whose mission is to bring fairness to leader selection, development, and succession. And I'm very happy that today joining me is Kate Hyatt, who is a long-term colleague and friend of Pinsight, and she serves as the Chief People Officer at Healthgrades. Hi, Kate.
Hey, Martin. How are you?
Good. How are you doing today?
Good to be, glad to be here.
Yes. So in today's episode, we are talking about increasing diversity in the next generation of leaders, and we'll be discussing our latest research titled Repairing the Broken Rung, How to Overcome Bias in the Leadership Pipeline. If you're interested, you can download the full copy at repairtherung.com. You know, Kate, as I look at our topic today, it strikes me that this is nothing new. We've been talking about diversity in leadership roles for many, many decades. So I'm wondering, is this still a problem today? What are you seeing in the field?
Yes, I am certainly still seeing there to be challenges, hopefully also opportunities in this area. You know, I think if you look at the executive leadership team of most public companies and privately held companies, you still see a lack of diversity. The number of female CEOs, unfortunately, has continued to go down instead of increasing over the last 12 months. And the same would be true for board membership, even though there are laws in the state of California and in Europe requiring a higher percentage of women serving as board members for companies. So yes, we've made some progress, but then there's still a very, very long way to go.
It seems that the progress has been quite slow then. Why do you think that is?
That is a great question. You know, I do think that when there are regulations put into place, for example, with the requirements around women serving on boards, you do see progress being made. So that, of course, is the stick versus the carrot as far as companies, you know, taking steps to be more diverse. You know, I think that there still is an incredible amount of unconscious bias, and that is how people feel about women, but how also people feel about people of color, and that those are hard to solve. It's something that was years that went into forming those unconscious biases. So it certainly takes a lot of focus and awareness to address those biases as well.
Yeah, that is exactly, I'm glad you bring it up. That's exactly what we found through our research as well. Just the amount of unconscious bias when organizations are selecting future leaders from within, it's really huge. I'm wondering, how do you see this play out in some factors that a lot of individuals really care about, like compensation and benefits, their pay, and the inequalities there?
Sure. We still continue to have significant inequalities from a compensation perspective. Women are paid less than men on the whole for similar roles, and women of color are paid at the lowest level of all the potential groups. Men of color, but men of color also are not paid at the same level that white men are. And I think that we are making some strides in this area. Many of the states and cities in the U.S. Have enacted regulations and restrictions around asking candidates for their current compensation information. And I can remember probably 10 years ago, we were still asking candidates not only to provide that information, but to provide documentation, like their tax returns and their W-2s. And unfortunately, that question led us to just perpetuate those inequities. And rather than thinking about, what is this job worth to the company and using a true market pay process and perspective, we would maybe bring someone in at 5% higher than where they were, 10% higher than where they were. And that then just, again, perpetuates those inequities. So I do think that some of the legislation will help us avoid some of those decisions. However, I do believe that organizations need to go one step further and actually do annual pay equity analyses where they're looking at their employee population, looking at all the employees within, a certain role, and looking at their compensation. And you don't necessarily know what your problems are until you actually have the data and analyze the data.
Yeah. So it sounds like that you would perpetuate the history. So if somebody or some groups were just historically paid less, when they would even come to a new organization, their compensation is based on what they were making before. So it just keeps on, inequalities just keep on going. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, things have changed quite a bit in the past 3 weeks. We're living in a completely different world, it sounds like, through this health and economic crisis. And I'm wondering, what are some of the new challenges for diversity in organizations as we are going through layoffs and furloughs, and as organizations are now filling riskier leadership positions? What are some of the things that you have noticed, or that maybe from your experience we should pay attention to?
Sure. One of the things that I have concern around would be those decisions made around furloughs or layoffs without having data to help make those decisions. And with so many companies in the US being on a January 1 to December 31 financial year, it's very, very common that the compensation planning process is taking place in March. And that means year-end reviews, reflecting on last year, thinking about merit increases and promotions and bonus payouts, et cetera. Given that we all made a lot of decisions around work from home right around that March 10th timeframe, that overlapped with compensation planning for many, many companies. So that means in many cases, there probably weren't a lot of conversations to reflect on last year. There weren't a lot of notations or documentation that was actually done to reflect on the previous year. And so then going forward, there may be decisions made based on all of the errors that we know of, whether it's the halo effect or the recency effect. All of those are going to be really front and center, because in many cases we just don't have that objective documentation.
Okay, and then where would be your concern that this is actually playing out?
So not having that documentation to reflect on last year's performance, if there were decisions made decisions made to save cost and furlough employees or lay off employees, employees may be retained, unfortunately, because the manager likes them, because they look like the manager. There's an affinity between the manager and the employee that is completely subjective and doesn't actually reflect the contributions that the employee made the previous year. So again, it's kind of a perpetual discrimination per se against people of color and women who may not have that close relationship, and even that relationship outside of work that some of the men could have.
Yeah, and our research has actually shown that all managers, whether they are male or female, have this unconscious bias of a high potential employee looking like a white guy. And I wonder if that is also reflected in any sort of personnel decisions that they are making, and that could be relevant now as they are making layoff decisions or furloughs.
Yeah, or decisions made around promotions as well. Even in the midst of a global pandemic, there is still turnover. So there are still employees leaving your organization. In many cases, companies are backfilling those roles. And yeah, with kind of getting out of the normal office environment, I think there may be a tendency to kind of streamline or skip some of the more formal objective processes that occurred pre-COVID in terms of making those decisions around promotions.
Yeah. I think that's a really nice segue to the next topic, and that is, we found through our research that majority, and I'm saying 89, 90% of organizations are relying on the judgment of managers when they are identifying the next generation leaders, whether those are high potentials or successors for key positions. And of course, I'm wondering, why is that? Why are we so ready to trust managers' judgment to make these important business decisions, even though we know that there are all these different biases that come into play here?
I think part of it is tradition. It kind of goes to that's the way that we've always done something. We put someone in a people manager role because we value what they do and how they do it. They are a high performer or a high potential themselves. So we trust them to make those decisions. Unfortunately, if we don't give them the tools to do that, it's very, very common that they will not make the best decisions. And even with a succession planning scenario, the processes that I've used over my career involve a lot of data from different sources and a lot of input from different sources, because we all know that there are employees who what they do best is manage up, and their manager may think that they are an A++ player, but if the manager is not getting input from their colleagues, from their partners in other departments, certainly from their direct reports, if they're in a people manager position, then the data is just very, very limited. It's just a tiny slice of the person's overall performance and skills and effectiveness.
Yeah. How can we then fight these biases that do creep up into this process as business leaders and HR professionals? What are some of the systems processes that you've seen work really well?
In my current company at Healthgrades, we actually did bias awareness training for all of our employees, and we thought that was a good place to start. We also chose to make the training optional versus mandatory. It was highly recommended, but we didn't push it as this is compliance training and you are required to do it. We spent a lot of time selling people on participating in the training, and we're really happy to see that about 97% of our employees took advantage of the training. So I think that was certainly a start for us. What I've seen work effectively and this would be in a large global company. I had responsibility for succession planning for the more senior levels of the more senior roles within the organization. And we looked across the organization. We identified about 20 roles where we did not have a ready now successor identified. And then we also had about 15 individuals who we had identified as high potential, again, at more senior levels, who could potentially go into those roles with some coaching and with some development. And there was not an easy process, Martin. It took a lot of work, just, good, roll up your sleeves and get the work done. For each of the roles, we identified the critical skills, competencies, experiences, and potential derailers for each of those roles. And then for the candidates, for the potential successors, we did a host of assessments. We did several online personality and intellectual tests, as well as problem solving. And then we looked at each individual and assessed them against the roles. And we then did some extensive coaching and action planning. And for each of those individuals, there was something that they needed, either an experience or some development and coaching. And I'm really, really happy to report that in 2 cases, as a result of that program, we were actually able to promote 2 women, one to a CTO role that a white man left, and another one to a CFO role that a white man left. That would not have happened without focus and effort to get there. And that's the one thing that I think is important, is that succession planning and developing women and people of color, it doesn't happen just because you want it to happen. It takes hard work.
It sounds like a really big project, actually. Yeah, a lot of effort. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Very much so.
Yeah. All right. Well, now that a lot of the managers are actually managing from home and leading from home, of course, I'm wondering, how does that impact their ability to see the potential and even performance of their direct reports? And are we going to see more or less bias actually creep in because they're not interacting with them on the floor on a daily basis?
Right. Yeah, I think that this is the primarily working from home scenario does make it easier for individuals who are maybe a little bit more introverted, a little bit less outspoken, to kind of recede from view. And that is, that just happens. And I've certainly, seen I've seen the extroverts on my team be the ones who always have their cameras on, who always are changing up their virtual backgrounds. And then I'm seeing folks who are, it's cameras off, and they're visible only by name. And I think this is definitely a time when individuals who may be just a little bit more reticent in terms of expressing their opinion or suggestions they're kind of out of sight, out of mind. So what I have done with my team is to really try to pull those folks into video and make them comfortable, and do that by having team meetings where everybody's all on camera, but maybe it's just something fun. Maybe we're doing a virtual happy hour and doing an icebreaker, getting to know each other better, even though we've all worked together for multiple years, but doing something like 2 truths and a lie, or bringing their pets or their children into the scene just to share a little bit of themselves. So it is definitely, this is a time, I think, when true leaders have an opportunity to step up and recognize the importance to make sure that everyone is comfortable in this new digital environment.
Yeah, and I think that's a really nice segue to my next question, is that on the flip side, for the women and the people of color, they are now working from home. It was difficult before to be seen as somebody who has leadership potential. Mm-hmm. But now that you don't have that direct contact or that in-person contact with your manager, it's much more easier to be hidden because you're working from home. What advice would you have for the up-and-coming women leaders and leaders of color? How do you stay visible, and how do you get noticed as somebody who truly has leadership potential?
Yeah. And I think this is similar, similar advice in a face-to-face handshaking world. And that is to volunteer. You know, offer to take something on. You know, there are a lot of challenges in this new world, and there are some new opportunities for folks to volunteer to do something like, you know, I'll research, you know, something for the team, like how to put up your virtual background in Zoom, or you know, how to create a thread on a Slack channel for the team, or, you know, volunteer. You know, I'm going to dig in and find a digital trivia game that our team can do, just as a little bit of a engagement and connecting activity. So I think this is it can be an opportunity to just kind of offer something up. And because this is such uncharted territory for us all, it's an opportunity to throw something out there that is, you know, it's an idea, and it's something that you can pilot. You know, the team or a group of employees can team up together and try it. See what works.
So I'm putting immediately my psychologist hat on, right, and trying to translate this into competency. So it seems like it would be the drive, the initiative that you would recommend. You mentioned something very interesting just a few minutes ago, and that's about how this group of successors and high potentials are generally people who are very good at managing up. Mm-hmm. So I wonder, how do these relate, and how do you manage up in a virtual environment? Is it same, different?
I think it's a little bit different, because you made a comment before about how, you know, a manager is not on the floor. They don't, you know, necessarily see day to day how people are working and how productive they are. I think this is a time to definitely keep your manager apprised of your work, so your productivity, your accomplishments, and I would say not wait for your manager to ask for that. And I think you can do that, you know, in a very, you know, succinct, you know, bullet points, and you know, I'm not suggesting a white paper or a lengthy PowerPoint deck, but certainly just keeping the manager up to speed, because we just keep in mind your manager is actually reporting to his or her manager. Mm-hmm. And so I think that then gives them data that they can provide as well.
Yeah. So we have two pieces of really good advice. So make sure that you are communicating with your manager and keeping them up to speed when you're working virtually, and then volunteer for projects, show the initiative and the drive, because people often interpret that as you having high potential. I'm looking at the clock, Kate, and these were some great topics, and thank you so much for your attendance today. For those of you listening in, if you are interested to learn more about our latest research on diversity and how organizations make high potential and succession planning decisions, make sure that you download our full report at repairtherung.com. And if you'd like to learn more about Pinsight's online leadership solutions that help organizations to minimize bias in leader selection, development, and succession planning, go check out us at pinsight.com. Kate, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate your insights, and I'm sure our listeners do as well.
Thank you, Martin. Happy to be here.